What makes a naval war film command the respect of real sailors? Is it the deafening roar of torpedoes slicing through steel? Or the silent agony of a crew waiting for orders that never come? These films capture the tension and terror of life at sea better than most history books. They reveal courage, fear, and betrayal in equal measure. So here are 15 naval war movies sailors respect, and 3 they absolutely do not. Number 15. The Cruel Sea, 1953. This British classic was more than a hit. It was a confession of a nation scarred by endless Atlantic patrols. The Cruel Sea followed Commander Erickson and his exhausted crew aboard the HMS Compass Rose as they battled Nazi U-boats in the merciless North Atlantic waves. It was not about glory, it was about endurance. It showed frostbitten faces, cracked hands, and the unrelenting loneliness of the convoy war. The film shocked audiences with its brutal realism at a time when Britain preferred victory parades to reminders of pain. Veterans watched in silence, some unable to finish the screening because it captured too well the chaos of the real ocean war. There were no hero speeches or triumphant music, only the hum of engines and the crash of waves echoing through cold metal corridors. Behind the camera director, Charles Friend fought the studio overtone. He refused glamour. He demanded grime smoke and fatigue on every frame. Navy officers who served in the Battle of the Atlantic said it was the only film that got the smell right. The salt diesel and death mixed together in every breath. When it released, sailors saluted its honesty. It became mandatory viewing in naval training schools decades later. The Cruel Sea still holds the respect of those who know what the ocean takes and never returns. Number 14. Das Boot, 1981. Das Boot was no ordinary war movie. It was a claustrophobic nightmare filmed inside a steel coffin. The German production stunned the world for daring to show World War II from the point of view of a U-boat crew. The story trapped viewers in a narrow submarine as they hunted ships and were hunted themselves. Every rivet, every echo, every drop of sweat felt alive with terror. The camera lingered on dripping sweat, trembling hands, and fear that smelled like oil and rust. Every dive felt like drowning in slow motion. The film was long, suffocating, and utterly relentless. Director Wolfgang Petersen refused to shorten it even when studios begged for faster pacing. He said the slow burn was the truth because in a submarine time stretched into madness. Veterans who had served in German and Allied submarines called it painfully real. Many broke into tears during screenings. Some could not continue to watch when the hull groaned and the rivets popped during depth-charge scenes. They remembered that sound from real life, and it chilled them. Das Boot faced controversy in Germany. Some accused it of humanizing Nazis, while others praised it for stripping away propaganda and showing only men trapped in hopeless duty. It became one of the most respected naval films ever made. Nominated for 6 Academy Awards, it redefined realism at sea and remains the standard every submarine movie is measured against. Number 12. The Enemy Below, 1957. The Enemy Below was a quiet storm of strategy and respect. Released during the height of Cold War tension, it dared to humanize both sides of naval warfare. Robert Mitchum played Captain Merle, commanding a U.S. destroyer escort hunting a German U-boat in the vast emptiness of the Atlantic. Kurt Jürgens portrayed the German Captain von Stolberg, a weary veteran disillusioned by the war he was forced to fight. What set this film apart was its moral symmetry. Both men were professionals, driven not by hatred but by duty. They studied each other through sonar pings and depth charges as if locked in a deadly chess match. The ocean between them was not water, but fate. Viewers could feel the mounting pressure as their tactical brilliance turned into mutual respect. When they finally met face to face, there was no victory speech, only a nod between warriors who understood that survival at sea was its own kind of defeat. Behind the scenes, the film broke new ground with its technical precision. The naval tactics were supervised by real veterans of the Atlantic campaigns, and even modern captains would later use it as a teaching tool. The Enemy Below was not just entertainment. It was an education in command restraint and the cost of conscience. Some critics accused the film of being too forgiving toward the enemy, while others praised it for its humanity in an era of propaganda. For sailors, it became a symbol of fairness and courage under pressure. Decades later, it inspired the creators of Star Trek who modeled the cat-and-mouse dynamic between Kirk and Khan directly from its central duel. The enemy below stands as proof that war at sea is not just fought with weapons, but with understanding. Number 11. The Caine Mutiny, 1954. The Caine Mutiny was a storm within a steel hull. Instead of focusing on battles and torpedoes, it examined the crumbling mind of command. Humphrey Bogart gave one of his most haunting performances as Captain Queeg, a man obsessed with control who unravels under the strain of leadership aboard a battered Navy minesweeper in the Pacific. The film opens with a ship of misfits and cynics thrown together in war. Queeg arrives promising order but delivers paranoia. His endless inspections, his trembling hands, and his desperate hunt for imaginary saboteurs turn the crew against him. When the ship drifts into chaos, the officers face an impossible choice between obedience and survival. Bogart's performance was terrifying and tragic. He was once the face of tough confidence, but here he portrayed fragility beneath the uniform. His courtroom breakdown became legendary. You could almost feel the sweat on his brow as he fumbled with steel marbles trying to justify madness. The U.S. Navy initially resisted cooperation, fearing it would tarnish the image of officers. The studio had to rely on retired naval consultants to authenticate procedures and dialogue. Despite this resistance, the film triumphed, earning critical acclaim and Academy Award nominations. Many sailors later admitted that it captured something true about command, the isolation of authority, and the danger of pride. Behind the camera, director Edward Dmytryk knew something about moral conflict. He had been blacklisted during the McCarthy era, and his own experience with fear and loyalty infused the story with deeper meaning. The Caine Mutiny remains a monument to the invisible battles fought in the minds of those who command and the quiet mutinies that echo in every heart under pressure. Number 10. In Which We Serve, 1942. In Which We Serve was not just a movie. It was wartime propaganda crafted with sincerity and pain. Written and co-directed by Noel Coward, it told the story of the British destroyer HMS Tora and her crew through the eyes of survivors clinging to life after their ship was bombed and sunk. The film interwove flashbacks of family, friendship, and duty to reveal how ordinary men carried extraordinary burdens. Every character had a story: the stoker, the officer, the signalman, and even the wives waiting at home. It was one of the first films to show war as a shared sacrifice, not just a soldier's duty, but a nation's endurance. For sailors, it was deeply personal. Many had lived those moments exactly as shown. The exhaustion, the smoke, the deafening sound of aircraft overhead. In Which We Serve was made in the middle of the war, when victory was uncertain and London still burned. Its authenticity came not from effects, but from memory. Noel Coward clashed with critics who doubted an entertainer could make a serious war film. Yet he wrote, directed, and starred in it alongside a young John Mills, and the result silenced all skepticism. The British government endorsed it as a morale booster, but sailors saw through the propaganda. They respected its honesty about loss, its quiet acknowledgement that courage does not erase fear. Behind the scenes, filming was brutal. Sets were soaked with real seawater and actors shivered for hours between takes. When it premiered, Winston Churchill himself praised it for reminding Britain what it was fighting for. Decades later, historians still regard it as one of the most authentic portraits of naval life under siege. It remains a love letter to endurance written in salt and sacrifice. Number 9. The Hunt for Red October, 1990. The Hunt for Red October was a Cold War masterpiece that combined tension science and paranoia into one of the most respected naval thrillers ever made. Based on Tom Clancy's debut novel, it told the story of a Soviet submarine commander, Marco Ramius, played with quiet fury by Sean Connery, who tries to defect to the United States with his crew and his top-secret stealth submarine. From the opening scene, the ocean feels alive and merciless. The Red October glides through the deep with a silence so complete it feels like death itself. American sonar operators chase whispers in the dark, while political forces on both sides rush toward a confrontation no one can control. The film's suspense was not built on explosions, but on decisions made in silence. Behind the scenes, the production faced strict military oversight. The Pentagon refused to lend full support, fearing the story's depiction of defectors might seem politically sensitive. The filmmakers had to build full-scale submarine sets inside giant water tanks to simulate the claustrophobia of the deep. Connery worked in near-freezing conditions for hours, but refused to break character. His authority and calm turned the film from a thriller into a meditation on loyalty. Sailors respected it because it portrayed the technology and tactics of submarine warfare with precision. Sonar language, sonar plotting, and crew coordination were astonishingly accurate. Many active duty officers later admitted that the film came closer to reality than most training films. The Hunt for Red October captured the logic of command under pressure and the constant weight of invisible war. It remains one of the few Hollywood films both sailors and intelligence officers agree got it right. Number 8. Greyhound, 2020. Greyhound was a modern revelation and one of the most accurate depictions of convoy warfare ever filmed. Written by and starring Tom Hanks, it followed Commander Ernest Krause during his first command of a destroyer escorting Allied convoys across the Atlantic in 1942. The film takes place almost entirely at sea with no backstory, no breaks, and no mercy. The pacing was relentless. The audience never left the bridge of the USS Keeling Code named Greyhound. Krause battles exhaustion, guilt, and self-doubt as German U-boats attack his convoy from beneath freezing waves. The sonar pings become the heartbeat of the movie. Each echo is life or death. The realism was so intense that veterans of modern navies praised it for showing what leadership feels like when every second counts. Hanks based the story on C.S. Forrester's novel The Good Shepherd, but stripped away romance and politics. What remained was pure duty. The film used advanced visual effects to recreate the North Atlantic's icy chaos, but relied on historical accuracy for dialogue and maneuvers. Hanks insisted that every order shouted on deck corresponded exactly to real naval procedure. Despite its digital release during the pandemic, Greyhound earned massive respect from sailors worldwide. Naval historians called it a film that understood fatigue discipline and faith better than any other modern war movie. There were no grand speeches or slow-motion deaths, only the cold geometry of command and the endless gray horizon. For many serving officers, Greyhound became the film that finally honored their unseen world of routine courage. Number 7. Tora, 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 1970. Tora, Tora, Tora was the film that turned the attack on Pearl Harbor into a precise historical chronicle rather than a propaganda tale. It was both an American and Japanese production made with cooperation between two teams of directors. Richard Fleischer directed the American sequences while Toshio Masuda and Kinji Fukasaku handled the Japanese side. The result was balance and brutal honesty that startled audiences. The story built slowly, showing the months of miscommunication that led to one of history's most devastating surprises. It portrayed the Japanese pilots not as monsters, but as professionals carrying out orders with grim precision. The Americans were shown not as victims, but as soldiers trapped by bureaucracy and arrogance. When the bombs finally fell, the destruction felt earned, not staged. The production faced enormous tension between the two film crews. Language barriers clashed with creative control battles, and historical disagreements almost sank the project. Both sides accused the other of bias. Yet out of that chaos came authenticity. Naval experts on both sides called it one of the most accurate depictions of fleet operations ever committed to film. When it premiered in 1970, audiences were divided. Some found it too cold and factual. Others praised it for showing war as an act of misjudgment rather than destiny. Japanese veterans reportedly wept in silence during screenings. American veterans admitted that it forced them to see the enemy as human beings for the first time. Tora, Tora, Tora remains a film sailors admire because it respects truth more than comfort. It dared to show that war at sea begins long before the first shot and often with men who wish it would never come. Number 6. Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, 2003. Master and Commander was not a film about war. It was a film about endurance, discipline, and obsession on the open sea. Directed by Peter Weir and starring Russell Crowe as Captain Jack Aubrey, it captured the essence of 19th-century naval warfare like no other movie before or since. Based loosely on the Patrick O'Brian novels, it told the story of the HMS Surprise chasing a faster French privateer around the world during the Napoleonic Wars. From the first cannon blast, the film pulled audiences into an age where survival depended on wind speed and willpower. Every sound of creaking wood and snapping rope was authentic. Every order shouted by the crew echoed with urgency. The ship became a living being and its men were its soul. Weir refused to modernize dialogue or simplify tactics. Instead, he built a film that felt like a documentary from the age of sail. Behind the scenes, the crew endured brutal filming conditions off Mexico's coast. Real ships were used for exterior shots while a full-scale replica was built for interior filming on a massive gimbal that rocked like a storm. Crowe insisted on leading his cast like a real captain, maintaining strict routines to create authenticity. Paul Bettany, as ship's surgeon Stephen Maturin, provided the emotional and philosophical counterbalance, showing the fragile humanity beneath naval rigidity. Critics praised it as a masterpiece of realism, but it struggled at the box office against flashier modern war movies. Still, sailors embraced it. Naval academies used it as a study of command and discipline under duress. The sound design won Oscars for capturing the fury of battle and the hush of the endless sea. 2 decades later, Master and Commander remains a monument to naval honor and the price of leadership under the sails of fate. Number 5. The Bedford Incident, 1965. The Bedford Incident was one of the most chilling Cold War naval dramas ever filmed. It starred Richard Widmark as Captain Eric Finlander, a ruthless destroyer commander who pushed his crew and a Soviet submarine to the brink of mutual destruction. What made the film terrifying was not combat, but obsession. The story followed a NATO destroyer locked in a prolonged pursuit of a Soviet sub through the icy North Atlantic. As fatigue and paranoia set in, the crew began to question their captain's sanity. Sidney Poitier played a journalist aboard the ship, documenting the escalating madness. The tension was unbearable as sonar blips turned into symbols of human fragility. The film's climax shocked audiences, with an ending so sudden and bleak that theaters reportedly fell silent for minutes afterward. Behind-the-camera director James B. Harris crafted a grim reflection of the Cuban Missile Crisis. The story mirrored real fears within naval circles about accidental escalation. No one fired first, yet everyone died. The U.S. Navy refused to endorse the film, calling it defeatist. But sailors who had lived through nuclear alert drills said it felt frighteningly close to the truth. Richard Widmark based his performance on several real officers known for their perfectionism and isolation. The claustrophobic set design recreated the noise confusion and cold detachment of life at battle readiness. The Bedford Incident was not about heroes. It was about the price of command when technology and ego collide. Though not a box office success, it became required viewing among Cold War historians and submarine veterans. It showed that the most dangerous weapon in the sea was not the torpedo, but the human mind under pressure. Number 4. The Admiral Roaring Currents, 2014. The Admiral Roaring Currents exploded onto screens as South Korea's most successful historical war epic. Based on the legendary naval battle of Myeongnyang in 1597, it told the story of Admiral Yi Sun-sin, who with only 12 ships faced over 300 invading Japanese vessels. What unfolded was a story of tactical genius, courage, and sacrifice that defied every law of war. The film's massive sea battles were breathtaking. Real ships were used for close scenes while digital fleets filled the horizon. Waves crashed over decks as cannon smoke turned the ocean into fog. Actor Choi Min-sik gave a towering performance as Admiral Yi, a man haunted by politics, betrayal, and the crushing weight of duty. His calm defiance in the face of impossible odds became a symbol of national pride. The movie was not without controversy. Some critics accused it of glorifying violence, while others argued it was too nationalistic. Yet among naval historians and sailors, the tactics it portrayed were praised for accuracy. Admiral Yi's strategy of luring the enemy into narrow currents where their numbers meant nothing was still taught in military academies around the world. Behind the scenes, production was grueling. The cast endured storms and freezing water while trying to deliver lines over roaring cannons. The director, Kim Han-min, insisted on shooting many sequences in real tidal currents to preserve authenticity. The effort paid off. The film became a cultural phenomenon, shattering box office records across Asia. Sailors respected it because it showed leadership under absolute pressure. The Admiral roaring currents was not just a movie, it was a meditation on courage when the sea itself becomes your only ally. Number 3. The Sand Pebbles, 1966. The Sand Pebbles was a naval drama that mixed war and conscience. Directed by Robert Wise and starring Steve McQueen, it told the story of a U.S. Navy gunboat patrolling the Yangtze River in 1926 during the Chinese Civil War. It was not a story of victory, but of futility and disillusionment. The river became a mirror for empire, and the men aboard found themselves prisoners of their own mission. McQueen played Jake Holman, a rebellious machinist who believed in engines more than orders. His love for the mechanical heart of the ship clashed with the politics of command and the chaos of revolution. The film's power came from its quiet moments of doubt. Soldiers questioned why they were there and who they were fighting for. When violence finally erupted, it felt tragic, not triumphant. The Sand Pebbles was massive in scale. Filmed on location in Taiwan, it used real gunboats and hundreds of extras. The production was brutal. Cast and crew endured disease, tropical heat, and political unrest. McQueen, who rarely gave emotional performances, delivered his most human portrayal, a man trapped between obedience and morality. Upon release, it divided audiences. Some called it anti-American, while others praised it for showing that war's machinery consumes men as easily as enemies. Sailors respected its honesty. It captured the loneliness of service far from home and the moral confusion of missions with no clear enemy. The Sand Pebbles became a haunting echo of wars to come. Its legacy endures as a meditation on how even the most advanced ships cannot navigate the storms within their own crews. Number 2. Battleship Potemkin, 1925. Battleship Potemkin was the film that made naval rebellion immortal. Created by Soviet director Sergei Eisenstein, it dramatized the 1905 mutiny aboard a Russian battleship when sailors revolted against their oppressive officers. Though a silent film, it roared with energy that changed cinema forever. Every image from the heaving waves to the iconic Odessa Steppe sequence burned into history. The story was simple yet revolutionary. Starving sailors refused to eat rotten meat and were sentenced to death. Their comrades rose up sparked by fury and the desire for dignity. The film portrayed the sea as both prison and liberation. The mutiny spread beyond the ship, igniting the people on shore into rebellion. For audiences of the time, it was more than entertainment. It was a call to conscience. Censors across Europe and the United States banned it for fear of inspiring unrest. For decades, it was hidden or heavily edited, but sailors and filmmakers passed around underground copies like forbidden treasure. Eisenstein's editing techniques, the rapid cuts, the rhythm of waves and machinery, became the grammar of modern cinema. Though propaganda by design, Battleship Potemkin gained respect even among Western critics for its sheer visual truth. It showed that mutiny is not just political, it is spiritual. The men on the Potemkin were not rebels for ideology, they were human beings who refused to die without dignity. Today, naval historians and sailors still acknowledge its symbolic power. It remains the most influential film ever made about defiance on the high seas. Number 1. The Last Detail, 1973. The Last Detail stripped away the glory of naval service and replaced it with raw humanity. Directed by Hal Ashby and starring Jack Nicholson, it followed two Navy petty officers escorting a young sailor to military prison. The journey should have been routine, but became a deep study of freedom, rebellion, and moral duty. Nicholson's character, Badusky, was no hero. He was crude, bitter, and painfully real. Alongside Otis Young, he takes their prisoner on a detour across America, trying to give the boy a taste of life before confinement. They drink, fight, laugh, and confront the emptiness of their own service. There are no ships, no battles, and yet every scene feels like naval warfare of the soul. The Navy hated it. They refused all cooperation and even threatened lawsuits for its portrayal of enlisted men as broken and disillusioned. Critics loved it, calling it a masterpiece of truth. Veterans recognized its authenticity, the endless boredom, the strict hierarchy, the quiet rage against meaningless rules. Nicholson's performance won international acclaim, capturing both defiance and compassion in a single sneer. Behind the camera, Ashby fought studio executives who wanted to soften the tone. He refused. He wanted the film to hurt. The Last Detail became a cult classic and remains a rare naval story that never touches water but perfectly captures the ocean between duty and freedom. Sailors respected it because it was honest. It showed that the hardest battles are not fought with guns but with conscience. Number 3. They do not respect. Pearl Harbor, 2001. Pearl Harbor was a spectacle of noise and romance that missed the heart of history. Directed by Michael Bay and produced with blockbuster ambition, it turned one of the most significant naval tragedies into a glossy love triangle. The visuals were dazzling, but sailors found little truth behind the explosions. The attack sequences looked impressive, yet felt choreographed, not lived. For many veterans, it was painful. They had seen real fire smoke and fear, but on screen the suffering was replaced by style. The film confused valor with vanity. Even its historical moments were altered for drama, and the characters spoke like they were reading from recruitment posters. Sailors called it hollow because the ocean never felt real. Behind the scenes, the production consumed millions of dollars and countless effects shots. Yet all that power failed to capture the silence of loss that defines the real event. Historians criticized the inaccuracies while critics mocked its tone. The Navy distanced itself, completely refusing to praise it publicly. For sailors who understand what the attack meant, Pearl Harbor became the example of what happens when war is reduced to fireworks. It was spectacle without soul, a tragedy turned into a postcard. Number 2. They do not respect. Battleship, 2012. Battleship promised naval action but delivered science fiction chaos. Loosely inspired by the Hasbro board game, it followed an American fleet battling alien invaders near Hawaii. It had ships, guns, and uniforms, but no sense of reality. To sailors, it felt like a parody of their profession. The film's plot twisted naval command into comic book heroics. Officers barked impossible orders, while destroyers performed physics-defying stunts. The most unbelievable moment came when veterans supposedly commandeered a museum battleship to fight aliens using out-of-service guns. What was meant as tribute became mockery. Behind the scenes, the Navy supported filming, providing ships and access, yet later regretted it. Critics destroyed the movie, calling it noise without strategy. Real sailors laughed at its tactics, which ignored every rule of engagement. The radar displays meant nothing. The dialogue felt alien, and not just because of the invaders. For those who had actually served Battleship, was the film that forgot respect. It treated the sea as a video game and the fleet as toys. The only battle it truly lost was the one for authenticity. Number 1. They do not respect. U-571, 2000. U-571 pretended to be history but turned real sacrifice into fiction. The story claimed American sailors captured a German Enigma code machine during World War II, a feat actually achieved by the British months earlier. Veterans from both nations condemned it, instantly calling it an insult to those who died for the truth. The film had tension atmosphere and capable actors, yet its rewriting of history broke trust. Even Prime Minister Tony Blair publicly criticized it in Parliament, calling it historically offensive. British submariners felt erased from their own story, while American veterans felt embarrassed by Hollywood's attempt to rewrite honor for box office glory. Behind the camera, director Jonathan Mostow defended the changes as creative license, but the backlash was unstoppable. The Royal Navy refused all cooperation with future American productions for several years. Sailors saw it as proof that spectacle had replaced sincerity. For real naval men, U-571 is remembered not for its submarine battles, but for its betrayal of history. It remains a film that looks the part, but never earned the respect of the ocean or those who served beneath it. These films reveal a truth sailors have always known. The sea forgives nothing, and it exposes everything. So Some movies honor that truth while others bury it under noise and ego. The ones that endure show respect for silence, for fear, and for duty. Which one do you believe captured the sea best? Subscribe and tell your story below.